Muy buenos días a todas las personas que empiezan a unirse. Es un honor tenerlos con nosotros en esta sesión virtual donde vamos a explorar temas totalmente clave relacionados con las oportunidades que ofrecen diferentes instituciones en el mundo con las que Colfuturo tiene convenios y acuerdos de cooperación. El día de hoy estamos con American University School of International Service, quienes se unen a Colfuturo en esta ocasión para compartir todos los conocimientos, las experiencias y su experticia y perspectiva que seguramente van a enriquecer el proyecto académico que cada uno de ustedes tiene en este momento. Se abordarán temas relacionados a oferta académica, opciones de financiación y muchos temas más que sé que van a serles de muchísima utilidad en este proceso. Me presento, mi nombre es Karen Martínez, soy parte del equipo de Consejería Académica y Relaciones Internacionales en Colfuturo y voy a ser la moderadora de este webinar. Si tienen alguna inquietud, por favor, no duden en dejarla en el cajón de Q&A y al finalizar la sesión yo se las formularé allí. Quiero recordarles que en esta segunda mitad del año pues estamos realizando todo este tipo de webinars con todas las universidades de convenio. Los invito realmente a estar muy pendientes de nuestra página web para que puedan inscribirse en todos estos espacios y aprovecharlos al máximo. Así que ya para dar inicio a nuestra sesión, les quiero contar en términos muy generales que el convenio que tiene Colfuturo con American University consta de ofrecer 5 becas del 50% en el valor de la matrícula. Así que es una oportunidad invaluable que seguramente van a saber aprovechar. Sin más preámbulos, Gia, thank you so much for being here today. We are so happy to have you with us. So you can go ahead and start your presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. And hello, everyone. My name is Jia Jia. I'm the Director of Admissions with American University School of International Service here in Washington, D.C. I am delighted to be here today because I get to meet and talk with all of you who are interested in graduate school in international affairs in the United States. And SIS has been a longtime partner of Cofuturo. So we are super excited to meet with all of you in this virtual setting. So let's get started with talking about American University School of International Service, where we do global differently. So, a little bit about the introduction for the School of International Service in terms of who we are as a school. As many of you know, we are located in Washington, D.C., which is the nerve center for a lot of US government agencies, international organizations, nonprofit organizations, think tanks, as well as many other types of entities and major international affairs players. So, being in Washington, D.C., our students have the unique advantage of taking a front row seat to really witness what's happening not just in the city but also worldwide. And SIS is also a top 10 School of International Affairs according to the Foreign Policy Magazine ranking. So that means we really have a robust set of international affairs curriculum and we work with all of our students to really make sure that they get a world-class education for our field. Now, SIS is also a school that is very dedicated to the ideas of service and leadership. So we have, even though we are a School of International Affairs, we actually are named the School of International Service because we really want our students to be of service to the international community. So here at SIS, our faculty, students, and our alumni really work on a wide spread of issues that are not just sort of about themselves, but it's more about making and improving the lives of the communities worldwide. And SIS was also founded based on President Eisenhower's vision to wage peace. So it was during the height of the Cold War, and President Eisenhower essentially called upon different universities to really think about a time when we can sort of wage peace versus war and really think of a productive way of approaching international affairs so that the different, world communities and populations can all be a part of making the world a better place. SIS is known for our approach, interdisciplinary approach to international affairs. And we will talk more about that with some examples in a minute. But the idea of being interdisciplinary means that, we really pulling not just the traditional political science perspective for studying international and global issues, right? We pulling disciplines such as history, language, anthropology, statistics, economics, and sometimes the sciences, and oftentimes the sciences, to really have a collective sort of different lenses to look at global issues together. And last but not least, SIS is a school, is actually one of the first schools in the US, one of the first international affairs schools in the US to have a LEED Gold certified building. So that is one of the highest environmental certifications for any kind of building and construction. And SIS is really proud that we actually put into practice the kind of environmental stewardship that we talk about in our classrooms. So on the right hand of the slide, you will see a select number of SIS longtime partners, and you will see that CoFuturo is one of them. SIS also works with the Fulbright program, the Institute of International Education, amongst others, to really collectively support international students coming to Washington, D.C. and SIS to study. So let's take a very quick look at the makeup of the SIS community. I'm not going to read through all the numbers, but all to say that, the SIS cohort every year really draws from a wide range of global, social, lived academic experiences, right? We have, the majority of our students who have had some type of international experience. Most of them speak at least one foreign language. And we also have a very large faculty body, over 120, which means that when you are at the school, you have many faculty members that you can work with, whether it's in terms of academic research or individual class projects. And having a large faculty body also means that you will have a very small class size. Typically, a graduate class at SIS averages around 16 or 17 students. So having a large faculty body really makes sure that our students will be able to get that kind of close attention. Okay, so I want to now pivot a little bit to look at two specific examples of students from Colombia that we have worked with, in the last few years. And I think it's always helpful to put sort of a face to the name, right? So here we are looking at the first example, which is Marcela, who is our student from Colombia, who received her bachelor's degree in science, communication, and journalism from Uninorte. And while she was at Uninorte, she actually participated in the Model OAS program, which is a simulation organized and designed by the Organization of American States. So Marcela then came to SIS to study the master's program in intercultural and international communication. And she also worked on a special project where she served as a communications and organizational development consultant. So she actually worked with her classmates and took a trip to China where they worked with a local educational organization and they served as a consultant, a group of consultants, I would say, to provide a lot of educational development advice and recommendations to that organization. In case you are curious, the SIS curriculum actually has a consultancy project built into our degree so that you will always have the opportunity to work with a real world client without having to look for one on your own. Now, after her degree at SIS, Marcela went on to work as a consultant with Global Partnership for Education, and she has recently been working as an IT analyst at the World Bank. Okay, so now let's take a look at David, who is also our student from Columbia, who graduated much more recently. I believe it's about 2 years ago. So David studied economics and business at Universidad ICESI when he was in Columbia. He then worked at the American Chamber of Commerce in Columbia. After that, he applied for Cofuturo. He received a Cofuturo, and he came to SIS to study the master's program in global governance, politics, and security. And David, every time I ran into David, he was always very, very busy, not just with classes, but also with taking advantage of other opportunities and events and networking in Washington. And all of his academic and professional connection efforts really paid off because as soon as he graduated, he was hired by the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C. And we are super excited to have such success stories coming out of our students coming from Columbia. So let's take a look at what David and Marcella have in common. One thing I would say is that neither of them came from a traditional background, right? A traditional background for international relations would be probably international studies and political science. But in the case of David and Marcella, one of them studied business and economics, and the other studied communication. Because the field of international affairs is a very broad field, really teaching you all the global dimensions, whether you are in communication and business and policy making and environmental work, we really think that this field has a lot of applicability that is relevant to sort of the global context that we are working within today. And in the case of David and Marcella, they also did a lot of cross-sector work. They didn't just stay within one type of organization, right? They didn't just stay in private, they didn't just stay in public. They actually moved from private to international, public to private, so on and so forth. All to say that SIS is very much a place where we encourage students to explore different sectors of work, different disciplines of work, because the kind of skills we train you are really meant to carry you from discipline and sector to sector. And the last thing I would say about David and Marcella is that they truly maximized their time in the degree. They didn't just take classes, they participated in all kinds of co-curricular, extracurricular activities that they could get their hands on. And they really made the most out of their time at SIS, but they also in Washington, D.C., which is why they had such successful careers shortly after they graduated. So here is a slide with some quick examples of where SIS graduates end up working. So you will see that at a very quick glance, right, our split for graduates in terms of employment sector is pretty even. It's about 1/3 going into nonprofit, a little more on the nonprofit side, about 1/3 going into private and 1/3 into government. And then you have the remaining 3% moving on to, maybe a PhD degree. So all to say that, our graduates are really spread across different sectors of global work. And you will see from the employment examples on the left that, some of them work at private entities such as Google, some of them work at global organizations such as Organization of American States, and then there are also nonprofits. So we are really proud of the fact that our students have such a wide range of career, and that speaks to not just the opportunities in Washington, but also the fact that an SIS degree can carry you very far. Here is to take a quick look at the big spread of SIS graduate programs. So you will see the majority of the programs in purple, and they're mostly master's standard 2-year master's degrees. You will also see 2 gray tiles here. the development management program, which is primarily designed for students who are interested in international development type of work, but with a focus specifically on management. And you need to have at least 4 years of work experience. And then you have the Master of International Service program, which can be done on campus or online, for which you need to have at least 7 years of work experience. The actual concentration is something that you can tailor design. It doesn't have to be development. It could be security. It could be conflict resolution. It could be human rights. It could be governance, so on and so forth. But all to say that the purple programs you see, with the exception, of course, of the PhD program at the very end, the purple tiles are mostly our standard 2-year programs. And then the gray tiles are our shorter slash expedited programs that usually takes a year to a year and a half based on your level of work experience. And we can come back to that, but this is really to say that, SIS has a wide spread of programs, and I know sometimes it can be hard to choose. But oftentimes we see students really, especially our international students, who are really excited about exploring various topics within international affairs, and you have a lot to choose from. A couple of things before I move on to the next slide, I would also highlight is if you look at the last row, global governance, politics, and security, as well as global governance, politics, and security, quantitative economic methods program. So those two are sister programs, and they are basically our version of the classic international affairs generalist degree, right? So GGPS would essentially allow you to have a very flexible curriculum where you can choose to focus on a wide range of global issues. It could be security, it could be governance, it could be regional economic issues. There are a lot of concentration options, combinations, I would say, that you can work with. So that's sort of what we call a generalist international affairs degree. It's kind of encompassing of many, many international issues. Now, there are also students that come to SIS because they want to focus on a very specific topic. So it could be international development, it could be US foreign policy and national security, or it could be international peace and conflict resolution, right? So by definition, you will notice that those are more sort of niche, specific topical areas versus a generalist international affairs degree. Now, I also want to sort of get your attention to a program which is in the second row called the International Affairs Policy and Analysis Program. So unlike other programs where you have sort of a topical where you have a thematic area within the name of the degree itself, IAPA is actually a program that heavily focuses on international affairs skills. So this could be leadership skills, organizational development skills, communication skills, or trade and economic and quantitative analysis skills, right? So the primary focus of the IAPA degree is to give you that really concentrated training in skills, and then you choose a thematic area, a topical area that may be aligned with your interest. So all to say, just to quickly recap, right? We have 2-year standard degrees, which is the bulk of it. We have expedited, shorter 1 to 1.5 years degrees if you have more work experience. And within the 2-year degrees, you have, a sort of a generalist international affairs degree, and then you have topical thematic degrees, as well as one that is more focused on international affairs skills. And last but not least, we do have 2 fully online degrees as well, which is to the right-hand side of the slide, as well as a PhD in international relations. Okay, here is a quick look at the SIS master's curriculum. So the actual number of credits will vary a little bit from program to program, but it's good to see the building blocks of an SIS degree. So you would come into your degree with some foundational courses, we call them core courses that you need to complete. You typically have an area of economics, an area of research methodology, And then you move on to what we call the concentration, which is typically we give you a good list of courses or concentration examples to choose from. But if you actually want to explore topics that are at the intersection of maybe two or more concentrations, you oftentimes have the ability to tailor design that to something that you are passionate about. And then you have something called the electives, which is where you either get to do an internship or you get to do another course, or you get to do some skills institutes, which are skills workshops that we teach over a weekend by practitioners in our field. And your program is going to culminate in something called the capstone, which is essentially your final project. For those of you who are thinking about moving on to a PhD program right after your master's, you can certainly choose the thesis or research paper option. We also have really about 75% of our students choose to do the practicum, which is the consulting project that I mentioned earlier. And the practicum is where we give you a list of clients. You choose to apply into one of them, and you work in a group of about 10 to 12 students. So let's actually take a look at how at SAS we help you build skills. We talk a lot about international affairs skills these days, so this is how we do it. And on the previous slide, I mentioned that you have the opportunity to do an elective course or do an internship, and you also have the opportunity to do some skills workshops. So this is what we call skills institutes, and we have some examples here for the kind of skills that are oftentimes covered by our Skills Institute program. Now, the sample practica are essentially the sample consultancy that you get to do as part of your degree. So whether you're interested in national security, you're interested in cyber policy, you're interested in climate migration, or environmental, corporate impact on environmental and social rights, we have something here for you working with a real world organization. And these are just a very small selection of everything that we offer. One practicum I would share as an example is that for the last couple of years, we have been working with the IOM, the International Organization for Migration, on a practicum focused on climate migration and climate justice. So that has been a popular practicum for many of our students. And I thought it may be interesting for you to see a consultancy that is done with a very well-known international organization. Yeah. So moving on quickly to the application process. So to submit an application for SAS, you need to complete the online application form. For the master's program, you will be submitting 2 recommendation letters, all of which can be submitted online. You will upload your resume, your personal statement, and we have 3 essay questions that you need to answer for your personal statement. You need to send us an official transcript issued by your university in Colombia, for example. And an official transcript is actually defined not as a transcript submitted by you, the student, but it actually has to be emailed to us directly by the university. And there is an application fee, which is actually waived if you are a co-futuro applicant. And there is also applicable test scores, which for most of our international students, we are talking about the TOEFL or the IELTS or the PTE or the Duolingo with minimum scores listed on this slide. Now, for master's students, there is no other test you need to take. You do not need to take the GRE, but if you're applying for the PhD program, then you do need to submit results of the GRE. A quick look at the master's application deadlines as well as PhD. So if you're interested in starting your degree in fall of, let's say, 2026, then your priority application deadline is January 15th. So we call it priority deadline because if you complete your application by January 15th, you are guaranteed a scholarship consideration. Now, if you complete your application after this deadline, then you will be considered. It is absolutely still possible, but you will just be considered on a space and a scholarship available basis. And one thing I want to highlight is that working with our co-futuro students, we know that typically you probably will not, you will apply to SIS and receive your admissions decision sometime in February or March, but you probably don't hear from co-futuro until a little later in the spring. So that is totally okay. You will go through the application process with us as usual, and you can indicate on your application that you're in the process of applying for co-futuro. And then after you receive your decision from co-futuro, then you can come back to us in case we need to make a change to your scholarship. Okay, so in terms of scholarship, there is no separate application. As long as you submit the entire regular application by the deadline that we just looked at, you will be considered. SIS funding really comes in different forms. The majority of our students will receive something that is a partial tuition scholarship. So we don't offer full rides, but we oftentimes offer partial tuition scholarship. And some of our students also have the opportunity to receive an graduate assistantship, which allows them to work with a professor for academic research and teaching, working 10 hours a week. And many of our students also come with outside funding, such as co-futuro, as well as the Fulbright. So if you are applying for the co-futuro and if you have been awarded, then you are eligible to receive 50% of your tuition scholarship from SIS. And that is a long-time partnership that we are very proud of. Okay, so just a final slide here. Typically, sometime in October, November, SIS offers a graduate program open house on Zoom. So this is an opportunity for you to learn more about the programs and to meet with our professors and other students who are interested in applying for next year. But in addition to that, if you want to meet with us, a lot sooner than October, we have some Zoom information sessions as well. And you can you can take a look at all of our virtual visit events via the link on this page. And I have included my contact information here as well, in case you want to reach out to me directly to have a one-on-one session going through the programs as well as your particular journey leading up to grad school. So, okay, Karen, with that, I'm going to pause here and pass it back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this amazing information. So, yes, quiero invitar a todos los participantes de la sesión a dejar sus preguntas en el cajón de Q&A para formulárselas allí. Meanwhile, Gia, we have some questions for you. And the first question is about the GPA. University solicited a minimum GPA?
So SIS does not have a minimum GPA to apply, but I would say that the average GPA for the students that are admitted to SIS is usually 3.5. The reason why we don't have a GPA is because number one, we do have students that many students that come from different educational systems, right? So not everyone has sort of the letter A through F or a 3.5, 4.0 scale. So we are very aware of that. As a Colombian student, if you are applying to SIS, all you need to do is just to make sure that your university email us a copy of your transcript, and it needs to be in English directly. You do not need to translate or you do not need to convert your grades, but the transcript does need to be in English. And the committee then will look at everything that is in your application, your grades, your recommendation letters, and all your non-academic internship volunteer experiences to make a holistic decision. So,
Perfect. Thank you so much.
mhm,
Well, okay, you mentioned that for the admission process, students will need to do a personal statement essay, right?
that's right.
What advice can you give us for the elaboration of this document.
Is it about the personal statement in
Yeah,
particular? Okay. So the personal statement essentially, and you do have to be careful because every school that you will apply for will have slightly different requirements. So for SIS, for the personal statement, we have three questions that you need to answer. So essentially, it's a three-part essay, right? So the first question usually asks you about your, academic life, professional experiences that have led you to the decision to apply for a degree in international affairs and graduate school in general. The second question is usually about why is it that you have chosen this specific program amongst all other programs that you may be looking at, right? Why does this degree matter to you, and what kind of research or work that you hope to do with this particular degree? The third question is a little broader, and it's talking more about something that you have done in or outside school that you think may have created an impact for a certain community or population. So I'm sort of giving you a Reader's Digest version of it, but that's the idea behind the three questions for the essay.
perfect. Thank you so much. Well, another question that we have is, if Colfuturos select more than 5 people for American University, how will you select the 5 students who will receive the 50% scholarship?
Yeah, that's a good question. So obviously, I believe our current agreement is we would select up to 5 students a year. But obviously, and I unfortunately we haven't received a five more than 5 students, in I think for the years that I remember. So if we actually end up getting more than 5 students, I will be very delighted. And we would certainly, 5 students are guaranteed, to receive the 50% tuition. And I would say we would do everything we can to support, additional students if they come through. So,
Awesome, thank you. Well, can students work on campus?
mhm. Yes. So when you are a student in the United States on a student visa, you can work up to 20 hours a week on campus. So what I would say is, students do a variety of different jobs. Sometimes they work 10 hours a week at the library, 10 hours a week at the school where they're doing their degree, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do 20 hours just from one position. And you should actively explore any and all position that is open. And the only thing I would just give our students a heads up is that, typically the income from working on campus for 20 hours a week is helpful in offsetting some of your living expenses, right, for your food and accommodation, but it typically is not a major source of income to cover your tuition. But because all of you are here, looking at CoFuturo as well as, SAS as a partner, I think that the majority of your tuition would be covered, if not all of it. So you're already in a really good position thinking about, your financial commitment.
That's perfect. Well, Dia, we don't have any more question for you. So thank you again
Okay.
for your disposition and your time. This was an excellent presentation, and I
Yeah.
really hope to see you in the next opportunity.
That's great. Thank you so much, Karen. And I'm putting my email address back
Yeah.
here. And feel free to reach out if you have questions, and happy to do a one-on-one session for anyone who's interested. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Gia. Have a nice
All
day.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Y a todos nuestros asistentes, mil gracias también por su participación y su interés. Los invitamos a estar muy pendientes de nuestras redes sociales y nuestra página web. Hasta luego.